I don't blame so many people that I see as patients for their obsession with cholesterol. Doctor, what is my cholesterol? My cholesterol is normal, therefore I must be at risk. Somebody had a heart attack and they went to a cardiologist, they put on a statin drug, their cholesterol's in control, that's all they can do for their risk, eat well and exercise. Certainly eat well and exercise is key. Whether or not cholesterol is as important as we think it is, has yet to be really understood by the general public, by the consumer. Fact is that cholesterol alone is just one marker of what must be a very complicated process that causes cardiovascular disease. Even people who get angiographies, where they actually put dye into the arteries and the calcifications are identified, don't realize that many of the potential areas that can cause a clot are soft and may not even be seen on the so-called angiography. So that's to begin with. Now, with regard to cholesterol, there's lots of data, and we're going to look at this over a number of videos in much more detail. I'm going to get some experts in. But there's lots of data to show that taking a statin drug and lowering cholesterol in some selected population, primarily men, may make a difference in terms of decreasing their overall risk factor. Maybe not from lowering the cholesterol, but potentially from decreasing the inflammatory process inside the lining, the endothelium of the artery, amongst other things. And what's really interesting about it is that the data is not at all clear with regard to statin drugs in women. In fact, it seems pretty clear that it doesn't make much of a difference in terms of decreasing their outcome. Remember, there's a thing, and I have this on my on the Dr. Sam Benjamin, Dr. Sam Benjamin fan page. There's a whole issue about process and outcome. Okay, and we'll get to that in a minute. In other words, just because it seems like it makes sense that something would happen and give us a good end result in the human body does not mean that that's actually what occurs. All right, so we're talking about cholesterol. There's good and bad cholesterol, HDL and LDL. One of the assumptions has been that HDL, a good cholesterol, protective, if we can raise it in somebody who has a low cholesterol, that we will therefore decrease their risk of getting heart disease. But in fact, in a study conducted by the National Institutes of Health, and which was stopped abruptly well before the study was completed, we discovered that using niacin, which raises HDL, in fact, increases the risk slightly of a stroke, and really did not seem to have much of a difference in terms of decreasing the risk of getting a heart attack. So again, process. It looked like raising the HDL using niacin, that would make a difference, but in reality, it doesn't seem to be the case. Now, having said that, and we need to discuss this much more, and by the way, one other little thing. There is medical data showing that possibly lowering cholesterol in middle-aged women increases by 2 to 2.5-fold their chances of developing dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So this is not a simple issue. And what happens very often is that cardiologists look at one little thing and one little number, and the number may represent something that's going on in the disease, but may not explain the genesis, the real reason that the disease actually occurs, cardiovascular disease. They look at the number, treat the number, and you're treated. And that's simplistic, it's primitive, and sadly, it may be far more ineffective than we realize. Now, let's go to the next thing. With this obsession about cholesterol, there are a lot of people, many of them come to me, you may be one of those people, that prefers to use a, quote, natural product. Statin drugs deplete coenzyme Q10. And so you got to take coenzyme Q10 when you take a statin drug. That may be part, not all of the reason, why people get muscle pain in their legs and so on. And taking coenzyme Q10 often helps that or reverses it. Now, having said that, people are taking lots of a natural product, red yeast rice. Red yeast rice is similar in composition to a statin drug in reality, like lovastatin or pravastatin, and it comes from a fermentation process. That fermentation process, if it's not adequately done, this is very important, if it's not adequately produced, has as a byproduct within the red yeast rice something called, a compound called citrulline. Citrulline is nephrotoxic, it affects your kidney adversely. It's mutagenic, meaning that it can create birth defects. And it's carcinogenic, meaning that it can create cancers. There have been look-sees at which brands have citrulline in it and some don't. and you can look those up. ConsumerLabs.com has them. I'm not going to comment on the brands, and I don't think there's any assurance even within the brand, because there's no adequate regulation of natural products, supplements, and as a result, it's all over the board. Some of the stuff may be coming from China, may or may not be adequately controlled, I don't know. But what I do know is that citrulline is very dangerous. Again, kidney dangerous, birth defect dangerous, cancer dangerous. And I can't figure out, and by the way, if you take red yeast rice, because it's similar in composition to a statin drug, you also have to take coenzyme Q10. So what I want to know is, if you really are that segment of the population that requires taking a statin drug, why wouldn't you just take the statin drug? It's cheaper. Pravachol, pravastatin, or lovastatin, I think lovastatin as well, can be gotten for $4 a month or $10 for 3 months at Walmart, Costco, and other pharmacies that are trying to compete with them. Why would you buy a product that's poorly controlled, potentially dangerous, and more expensive, and maybe you don't even need it to begin with? So I am highly against the use at this point of red yeast rice, because I don't see any advantage. Just because something is natural does not mean that it's safe. And in this case, this is a perfect example of that. Lastly, when I mentioned to you regulation of natural product production, and I think we need more of it, I'm very, very, very concerned, and I don't want to let it go by, even though this video segment is really not about this issue, but I want to make a brief comment. The staunch pharmaceutical, big pharma advocates, the conventional doctors, they are looking for ways, and the FDA, are looking for ways to squeeze the natural pharmacy or the natural supplement industry. And their argument is getting tighter and tighter regulations, such that ultimately the supplement business will end up being controlled like any pharmaceutical product. You will not be able to get it except under the aegis of a doctor's prescription, and there'll be very few companies, if any, left, because they'll be put out of business. That's unreasonable. It is true that if even one life is lost or affected adversely as a result of taking a supplement or a prescription product, that's one life too many, and we need to address it. However, comparably, even though I feel that there needs to be more regulation of the natural products, I want to make it clear that comparably, the dangers that come from prescription products are far greater. And while we need to have improved regulation of production standards, I am not by any means suggesting that we should do the kinds of strict and difficult controls that the FDA and others have suggested, which would basically shut down the business. And here's why it's so hypocritical to me. Vioxx killed thousands and thousands of people. It killed them. An anti-inflammatory drug, people who took it said it was great for their joints, but unfortunately it caused terrible adverse sequelae, adverse reaction. People died from it. Somebody I know, I believe, died from it. It's a terrible tragedy. Now, the FDA knew for years that there was a problem with the Vioxx drug, and it was the chief medical officer who follows up on this stage 4 testing. He was checking to see what happens after the product was out, and he realized that there was a lot of data showing that it was a dangerous product. And yet for 2 years, he was a voice in the wilderness until finally he went public with it. He was threatened, it is believed, from telephone numbers that were within the FDA. Imagine that. You want to talk about conspiracy, there's no question about it. So what I'm trying to get to here is that, to begin with, natural products are nowhere near as dangerous as the kinds of things that have happened with prescription products, and the FDA and those people shouting for regulation should look within first to deal with their own house and what they're doing with prescription products. That does not mean that the natural supplement business should not be making more effort, and that the government may or may not need to intervene to be sure that in fact they do that. I hope I'm trying to put a balance on this. What am I saying in conclusion? One, the whole cholesterol thing per se, just cholesterol, is a folly and a great business, but it really doesn't tell us about the size of the particles, about sticky particles and those that are not, about inflammation. And we have a lot more to learn, and a lot more that we do know that we need to apply clinically, meaning we need to put it out there, not just research stuff. The second thing is, if you're already, far too many people are lowering their cholesterol for no reason, why would you even start considering red yeast rice? And if you're going to consider red yeast